Welcome to another episode of Work in the Light. We've been discussing God's armor at work. God gives his followers of Jesus his truth and his character as armor to help them stand firm against the constant push of the world and the devil. So today we're going to talk about the spiritual helmet comprised of the truth of our salvation. Let me give you a short story to start with. Now, a friend of mine and his wife moved to Florida, and he told me how great it was to walk along the beach to do their devotions together. I asked him how he avoided all the visual distractions, and what he replied was both a little on the humorous side and actually pretty profound. He said, "If I see someone distracting me, I flip down the visors on my helmet of salvation and I walk on by." Now, you may think his his response is a little funny or clever, which it was, but it's absolutely true. My friend was using God's salvation to protect how he perceived the world around him. Now, the Apostle Paul instructs us to do exactly that, to wear our salvation as a helmet of protection. Salvation transforms how we see things. It gives us a brand new perspective, God's perspective. When we wear salvation as a helmet, it protects us as all helmets do. We know what helmets are. We see them in sporting events and games. We see them on construction sites and mining tunnels and even in the military to this very day. Helmets are designed to protect the command center of the human, his brain. So think about what the brain does on nearly a nonstop basis. It constantly receives all the stimuli of the body and absorbs and processes, are you ready for this figure? 11 million bits of information nearly simultaneously every second. Every second. Smells can trigger cravings, past experiences, or maybe a gurgling stomach. We unconsciously close a window to pull a blanket up over our skin if we feel a gentle, cool little draft. A memory will set off adrenaline, making us angry or afraid or passionate, all controlled by our biological command center, the brain. So consider how our brain functions. Yeah, the brain discerns, tests, and analyzes what must happen to control our body based on what it perceives. Our mind also gathers and stores facts and experiences we encounter in our life in order to develop a protocol for decision making or for taking a course of action. Our brain stores, and here's another big number, 2.5 million gigabytes of information that can be called upon to create what we describe as intellect or will or discernment, problem solving, and maybe even intuition. To protect this amazing biological command center, God created a biological fortress called the skull. At birth, your skull is nearly full size. The nearly 25 bones are matched in pairs and linked together like armor. This creates a protective cavity called the cerebral cranium. The tensile strength of the human skull has been measured at, another big number, 10,230 pounds per square inch. And the compression strength is over twice that. If someone calls you hard-headed or thick-skulled, you probably just shrug your shoulders and say, yep, you're right. So why the biological overkill? Well, the skull protects the brain, and it's the epicenter of our cognizant being. It's the command center for our human body. All five senses are resident in the human head, four of which, sight, hearing, smell, and taste, are located only in the head. The head is where we perceive or take in the stimulus from the environment around us. Then we discern, process, plan, rethink, adjust, and react almost instantaneously, immediately, if you will, with what new stimulus provides us to consider. Well, God says we need a spiritual helmet too. The helmet fashioned out of salvation is the one that he's talking about. Soteria is the Greek word translated salvation, and it means safety. It means to rescue. It means to defend physically or to defend morally. Salvation protects and shapes our thinking, the way we use our brains, the way we consider things, our perspective. It gives us God's perspective. Salvation protects us from playing by the world's rules instead of God's rules. Salvation protects us from making promises we can't keep or compromises that cut corners to get something done quickly instead of maybe done with excellence for our clients. Salvation protects us from putting down someone in an effort to exalt ourselves. That may even include a competitor. Salvation protects us from aligning with people who have a very different value system in order to accomplish something. Salvation protects us from sacrificing our family relationships, time with our family, on the altar of personal success. Salvation protects us from the lie that we deserve the attention, the affection, or admiration of someone at the office to replace what we don't feel like we're getting at home. In short, salvation modifies how we see, how we hear, and ultimately how we think and act. It moves our perspective from a worldly point of view over to a godly point of view. So, how does salvation protect our thinking, seeing, and hearing from a wrong perspective, from a wrong place of viewing our life? Salvation tells us that we walk in victory that Christ has already won for those who follow him. So here are some of the things that are all part of salvation that we very rarely talk about. One is obvious, we're saved from sin, but that means I'm saved from my old fallen me, what I used to be like. We're saved from being lost. That means we're not wandering around this world without a purpose. We have a God-given purpose and a mission now. We're saved from tribulation. That means that we are stronger than any adverse circumstances that we come through. We're saved from what the Bible calls robbers and thieves that steal, kill, and destroy. That means that we're insulated from the lies and deceptions that tell us that we can't trust God or any of his promises. We're saved from judgment. That means we don't have to look over our shoulder because Jesus has removed our judgment at the cross. We don't have to be perfect. We could come to him and say, I made a mistake. And it says that he's faithful to forgive us and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. We're saved from a perverse generation. That means that we can stand firm against any of the world's rules or values with an absolute peace and sense of joy without any fear. And ultimately, we're saved from God's wrath, which means that even at our worst moments, the fire of God's wrath toward us has been put out by the blood of Jesus Christ. And finally, we are saved forever. That means there is no limit to the term or conditions to God's salvation. We have it forever. In short, we're free to see our life in the way that God meant it to be seen, and free to live it without interference or distraction from competing voices, from competing perspectives. And just like my friend, we could take the visor on our helmet of salvation and flip it down whenever we need to. So what would that look like with your colleagues at work? What would it look like with your clients if they knew that you were with them, behind them 100%, giving them everything, that you weren't afraid of challenges? Think about it. And what would it mean, maybe in your personal life? What it would mean to your family if you walked with the helmet of salvation squarely on your perspective of things? All wonderful things to think about, and I hope that you do. And until we meet again, remember, work in the light, and remember to take God's armor at work.